I've been seeing the national debt come up a lot in recent discourse. Anytime you're in a conversation and the national debt comes up, that means that somebody is trying to take something from you. Or they're trying to tell you that something you want you can't have because we can't afford it. Look at all this debt. It's $38 trillion. Let's focus on paying that off first. I think this conversation has gone way too far in one direction. I think we got to bring it back to reality and just think about what it is we're actually talking about. The national debt is a good thing. It is the sign that the system is working. When you see that $38 trillion tag or whatever it is, that's how well it's working. Look, the U.S. government doesn't have debt the way you have debt. We don't borrow money the way that you borrow money from a bank or from a relative or something. The U.S. government sells treasury bonds, and investors, individuals, countries, banks around the world buy U.S. treasuries because they are the most stable investment in the entire universe. Everybody wants U.S. treasuries. I mean, think about when you put money into a bank and like a savings account at a bank. When you put that money in, that bank owes you all of that money plus interest. But banks still want your money because that's how banks work. They take that money and they invest it in something and they make enough that they can still pay you back. The U.S. government works the same way. We don't have debt. What we have is deposits. People around the world buy U.S. treasuries because they trust us with their money. This is a stable place to put your money, and we've always been good about our paying you back. Throughout the years, the treasury notes have always rolled over. We are A1 credit. The problem is that when people see the word debt, they think, oh, we better pay that off. They think, oh, we're in the red. We better get back to the black. But look, all the people who are buying these treasury notes, the people that we supposedly owe all this money to, they don't want us to pay everything off. Because if we paid everything off and we stopped issuing treasury bonds, they wouldn't have anywhere to put their money. I mean, go back through history and find all the places where the U.S. government got out of debt completely. All the places where we actually got out of red and got back to black. The most famous example was in the 1830s with Andrew Jackson. He was famously very paranoid about debt, so he made sure to pay everything off, and he actually got us back into black. But what happened was, when he stopped selling U.S. treasuries, those people had nowhere to put their money. And all that money ended up in the market, which led to a huge speculative bubble, which quickly burst and sent the country into a massive depression. Because there was no stability. That's what this entire system runs on, is stability. People put the money here because it is a stable place to put your money, and we've always been good on it. That's why when you see that $38 trillion tagline, it seems scary and it seems like a burden, but that's a sign of the system working. Every treasury note we sell is a vote of confidence from an investor. That's how confident people are that this system is going to keep running, that they're going to keep buying treasury notes. Look, everybody who has bought treasury notes wants us to be stable so that they get their money back. Everybody who's about to buy treasuries wants that first group to get their money back because they want the system to keep running. The U.S. government's role is to keep the whole system moving. They put the money here and we provide the service of stability, and in return we get liquidity and we can actually function as a country. We're not constantly scrambling to figure out where the money's going to come from. That's why it's so stupid when people use the national debt as an excuse to cut social services or to cut back on infrastructure spending. Because in their mind, their justification is we can't afford it. But what they're doing is creating instability. What they're doing when they say we can't afford something like universal health care, they're creating a system in which people freeze up. They don't want to quit their job because they don't want to lose their health insurance. They're afraid to go uninsured because they see all these people who are uninsured getting screwed over at the hospital. They end up being afraid to invest. And people around the world, they see what's happening. They see our current situation where everybody hates each other and everything feels so shaky. And people around the world start thinking, yeah, maybe the US is not a good place to put my money. The problem is not debt. The problem is stability. It's not about can we afford this? It's about does America still look like a good place to put your money? Look, so much of the conversation around the national debt, you end up with hearing this phrase like, what are we going to leave our grandkids? We can't leave our grandkids all of this debt. I think the better question to ask is, what did our grandparents leave us? They left us the interstate highway system. They left us the Brooklyn Bridge, GPS satellites. They left us with stuff that we could actually use to grow as a country. All of these things were massively expensive at the time they made them, but they were worthwhile. Look, I bet you when the national highway system was first proposed, there was probably somebody who was saying, hey, we can't afford this. Think about all the debt. We're going to screw over our grandkids. And if we had listened to that person, we would still be on the Oregon Trail. Imagine if you actually could talk to your great-grandkids. What would you tell them about the current moment? It's like, hey, great news. We cut the deficit a little bit.